Welcome to ABA Inside Track, the podcast that's like reading in your car, but safer. I'm your host, Robert Perry Cruz, and with me as always are my fabulous co-hosts.
Hello, Rob. It's me, Diana Perry Cruz. And it's me, Jackie. I just swallowed and my tea is stuck. So everyone, make sure that you fully swallow your tea before your name is going to be announced.
This is not a health advice podcast. This is a podcast about behavior analysis and behavior analytic research, where every week we pick a topic and discuss it. And by looking at the title, you will see this is a special week because this is our summer 2025 listener choice episode. Once a season, we do a poll on our Patreon page, and any member of our Patreon subscription can vote. That's patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. We have 3 topics, and you vote, and that's the episode we do. And as a bonus for our patrons, you're able to watch a video of our raw recording of the podcast.
Raw.
So you get, so if you're just listening, you didn't get to see Jackie almost die choking on her tea.
The uncut footage.
Who knows if it'll even be in the final cut? It probably will be, because it was great. And you also get a free code that you can use at checkout to get a free CE or no charge CE for listening to this episode as a thanks for being a patron at the $5 or up level. So thank you so much. If you're just listening to this on the free feed, hey, not a problem at all. We hope you're enjoying it. You're not going to get to see all the crazy antics that go on in the studio when we record a podcast. So Diana, your topic was the winning topic this season. For the first time in forever.
I can't believe it. For the first time in forever.
You won. So please, let's tell everybody unless they voted, in which case they already know. But for folks who didn't get a chance to vote, what is our topic today?
Yeah, so very exciting. I feel very honored to have been chosen, or my topic at least, which isn't really my topic, it's these authors' topics. But I thought it was interesting too. And that topic is factors influencing skill acquisition. And I do want to preface this, specifically, we're going to talk about reinforcement factors influencing skill acquisition. There's too many total factors to cram into one episode. I'll tell you about other times we've talked about this topic at the end of the show. So these are all articles related more specifically to aspects and parameters of reinforcement that could influence skill acquisition. And so I'm going to tell you what articles we will discuss in alphabetical order.
Okay.
They include Systematic Review of Differential Reinforcement in Skill Acquisition by Cividini Mota, Livingston, and Ifa. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2024. Reinforcer Choice as an Antecedent versus Consequence During Skill Acquisition by Guregian, Vladescu, Gashi, and Campanaro. That was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2020. Effects of Initial versus Frequent Preference Assessments on Skill Acquisition by Leon, Campos, Baratz, Gorman, Price, and De Leon. That was in the Journal of Developmental and Physical Disabilities 2025. And finally, the article that started it all, the reason why I thought we should do this episode, Assessing Parameters of Reinforcement on Efficiency of Acquisition, a Systematic Review by Weinstock, Goldman, and De Leon. And that was in Behavior Analysis and Practice 2023.
Beautiful. All right. Well, we've got a lot of articles.
I like how you said 2023 right
Thank
there.
you.
You're welcome.
In my extra spare time, I want to start reading books on tape.
I can see that.
Mm-hmm.
Rob has no comment.
He's like, you don't have any spare time.
He's heard this story before.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm working on my radio voice.
Oh, all right. Well, why don't you start us off with a radio voice? Let's talk about factors influencing skill acquisition. Let's start with that systematic review by Weinstock and Company. There are going to be a couple concepts in that article that are going to carry out through the rest of the article. So I thought, let's start there.
So this Weinstock article is really great. It is very thorough. If you want to read all of the ins and outs, you can swing over and check it out. But we're going to have to do like a quick run through on these things here. So they start us off saying that there can be many different factors that influence skill acquisition. And that is absolutely true. I think that this is a topic that resonates with folks because we as a field, we hear a lot about addressing challenging behavior, and that's a really important area. But we also have a lot of skills in teaching new skills and focusing on skill acquisition. But I think it sometimes can get a little bit less focus, and it's just as nuanced and just as complex in order to teach new skills and teach someone how to learn as it is to reduce challenging behavior. And so this is an area that I think people may end up struggling with because it is so complex and is perhaps has been less of a focus in their upbringing, schooling.
Their parents didn't bother to teach them about differential reinforcement schedules. What's going on in America?
Not my child.
What I like to say to our students is that we as behavior analysts are really uniquely positioned to be the folks who can go in and look with a microscope or fine-tooth comb or whatever metaphor you want to figure out what is going wrong when acquisition goes awry. And there are a multitude of reasons why that could be happening, and we can break them down, but Weinstock also breaks them down for us. So they identify several things that could be going on here.
Another thing really quick, Diana, before you
sure.
start, it's from the Leon article later, but another piece is a lot of times we don't think about skill acquisition and efficiency until there's a problem.
Yeah.
But we should also be thinking ahead of, are we using the most efficient practices? Because we all probably have had learners that have made consistent progress and it's felt like this seems pretty good. But just because a learner is making progress in acquiring new skills doesn't actually mean they're maximally learning. So are there ways that we can improve what we're doing? So it's not just about either they're learning or they're failing to learn. It could also be they're learning as fast as they could, or they're learning at an okay enough pace. And since a lot of our learners are often playing, catch up on certain skills, or they're acquiring cusp skills, they're going to allow for later acceleration as they continue their learning. It really is important for us to not just be thinking about progress counts the same. There's different levels of progress. So we do want to be thinking about efficiency, even if everything is, as far as we can tell, going great for our learners.
Yeah. And the more someone develops an error history as well with a set of stimuli, the more difficult it's going to be to acquire that skill cleanly. So
the most important episode ever been done, and you pay close attention, is what we're saying.
New title. So our authors, break it down for us and say there are several components of, and this is focused around discrete trial training. There's lots of different ways to learn, but that's kind of the focus here. And so the nice thing about thinking about it from a DTT perspective is very clear what these 5 components are. They are present in other formats of learning as well. So you could take this and extrapolate it out. But it's really clear and easy to see if you were observing a DTT session, each of these components. So, and any of these are places where there could be some parameter of reinforcement that is manipulated or could be manipulated that could be contributing to either increased efficiency in skill acquisition or decreased efficiency. So it could be something related to the cues, so the antecedent stimuli that are present that are going to evoke responding. So that could be your discriminative stimuli. It could be something related to the prompt. Here, you could have a stimulus prompt or a response prompt as well. Each of those, you could be using an effective or less effective method. The response itself, that is not on you to control. That's on the part of the participant.
Well, part of it's you, right? You have to make sure that
have to do with how well you're prompting,
Yeah.
right? And if they can actually engage in the response anyway, right?
True.
Like, if they only have, if they don't have any fingers, they can't point.
Well, it should be a response that is within the repertoire or...
You got really far in planning that TCCU program without checking the finger blinking ability.
Yeah.
I know maybe that's not, but you have to make sure they can actually engage in the response. The only reason I'm saying that is because I was watching a video the other day on YouTube and
The YouTube?
looking for stuff for class, and the response that the person was looking for was like way outside what the kid could do,
great
right?
point. Right.
So, and I was like, oh, you're not ever going to be able to teach that skill because they don't even have the skills to engage in that skill yet.
Yeah.
There's not like any prerequisites there. So
Yeah, good point. So the choice of the skill that's being learned
yes,
is another factor that should have been determined well ahead of time,
in advance,
but one could need to make adjustments to it if it's not appropriate.
fingers or not.
Yeah. So it could be as simple as that. And then the consequence as well is something that could be addressed here. That's actually what all of these articles are going to discuss, is the reinforcement component. And then how you are addressing the intertrial interval, so the duration between the trials. Each of those could be where your skill acquisition program is meeting its downfall, any or all. And a good behavior analyst is going to be able to ideally go in and recognize what each of those components is, and then address how they might need to be changed for the program to then become more effective. And in the literature, this is usually, we have to if it's a research study, we got to break it down, right? We're going to address one tiny, tiny little piece of this question one at a time. And usually the way that this is addressed within the literature is what's called the race to the top. I know Rob is wanting to talk about the race to the top comparison.
I think this is a design. I feel like every experiment should just be a race to the top experiment. There's only ones I want to read about. I want two experimental manipulations to go into Thunderdome. I want them both to enter. Only one may leave. I'm so tired of every experiment being like, when the results were idiosyncratic. It's like, blah, no. I want one to win.
Well,
I want some winners and losers. I'm American. You need to have a winner. You need to have a loser. You need to have an underdog story with a little research methodology you didn't think was going to make it, but then it does at the end because of coaching.
Yay, alternative treatment design. You did it. You came through.
Everyone was against them. All of the snobs were against differential reinforcement with extinction because it's a slob procedure, but then they won in the end. They won the big cup, and that's the procedure we use to this day. That's what I want. I like that narrative. It never turns out that way, but I can dream my big dreams about race to the top style research.
Yeah.
Even though there's a bunch of problems with it being not always
there are
great
problems with it. Yep.
design.
And this article and our others go into some of those as well. That one of the real challenges here is that you need to use an adapted alternating treatments design, meaning you have two different, let's say prompting strategies that you're comparing, but you can't compare them on the same exact set of acquisition stimuli because if you teach one set of stimuli using
happening.
Yeah. Two ways, you won't know which one was actually effective.
If only they forgot the stimuli in between trials, then it would be, yeah.
So you have to find two ideally identically difficult sets of stimuli.
Hard.
Yes, to use in your acquisition. And that's why you end up with these types of studies where you're like, we taught 6 random symbols, and this one we call a zeep-zorp, and that one we call it a bloop-blorp. Because
your improv class then? That's really good.
Shut up, bro. And so that's how you attempt to equate that, but then you've removed some of the applicability of the study into making it a little more translational. But that's why those things happen. And the idea is that you're looking basically to see what are the number of trials to criterion or some mastery level, and whichever system works better, whichever prompting approach works better, right? That's considered to be the quote unquote better approach because it's more efficient. So it takes less time to get to whatever the end goal is. But there are all types of challenges that could happen along the way. They could influence that efficiency as well as, we could have conversations about whether that's truly the best measure. These articles also bring up that not a lot of studies actually include maintenance data or longer term maintenance data. So efficiency of learning a skill may not really be reflective of maintaining that skill over time. But that's another conversation we can't have today because we don't have as much research to cover.
No. All right.
Yeah.
So that kind of gets into a little bit of that systematic analysis going on here with Weinstock and company. They looked at they looked at a huge body of research and said, all right, what do we know about different factors related to acquisition that may be important? And let's see what we have in the research. And like you mentioned, Diana, they found that not every article is great about talking about maintenance. Not every article is great about describing, hey, how did you figure out in your race to the top whether or not there was a giant confound in that, like, well, we use this one with the easiest task and this other type of reinforcement with the hardest task, and we'll assume that doesn't change it. I'm sure that did not happen. However, if you don't write it down,
but it could inadvertently.
You add a lot of potential confounds, which makes it hard for replication. But they looked at just so many different, as they called, themes of categorization of different manipulations that one could do in trying to improve the efficiency of a skill acquisition. They looked at differential reinforcement with extinction, in which you've got, kind of typically what you think about. Reinforcement is delivered contingent on correct independent responses, but prompted responses, correct or incorrect, nothing. You get nothing unless it's an independent response. So that would be one style. Differential reinforcement without extinction, again, in which you get reinforcement for your correct independent responses, and you get some type of reinforcement. Maybe it's lower magnitude, maybe it's lower quality, if it's prompted, or maybe it's a thinner schedule, right? So there is a difference, but reinforcement occurs whether it's a correct independent or correct prompted response. You have non-differential reinforcement, in which you're just like, you know what? Thanks for trying. Reinforcement delivered for prompted or unprompted responses. You have a differential outcomes procedure where you just have a specific reinforcer delivered following some response in the presence of a specific SD. So you just kind of have reinforcement for that target, and that's it. They also looked at different types of reinforcement. So they kind of compared different social interactions as reinforcement, because a lot of times what you'll see in research is social reinforcement, while it may be reinforcing of the response, is rarely more reinforcing than your Kit Kats and your Skittles of the world.
I don't know.
Except for Jackie, she's the outlier. She's the exception that proves the rule when it comes to social reinforcement being number one on your MSWO. They looked at topographically different reinforcers. So they just pretty much compared like lots of different reinforcers. And this kind of was their catch-all. So like when there was a change in how reinforcement was delivered and it didn't make sense in other categories, we called it topographically different reinforcers. They looked at comparisons of magnitude. They looked at quality.
Pop.
Sizes. They looked at, I love this one, and I kind of wish we had more about this, accumulated versus distributed reinforcement. So, hey, you did all the work. Now you get the big reinforcer, the larger magnitude reinforcer, versus after every response, you get a lesser magnitude reinforcer with those smaller units of responding. So that's the distributed type. They looked at compound versus single reinforcers. So what if for every correct response, you got an edible and praise or a high five, versus what if you just got praise? So again, they looked at, that was just one example, but looked at compounds of, different types of reinforcers put together versus one at a time. They looked at whether choice being delivered of who chose the reinforcer. The experimenter, was it the client or the participant in this case? Who was choosing the reinforcer? And then they looked at, and I think very important, I think we'd all agree, very important for skill acquisition, mistakes. So omission errors. So what if you ran your program wrong? How would that impact efficiency?
Bad.
Spoiler alert, that was 100% of the time will impact the efficiency of learning.
I'm surprised they didn't talk about non-contingent reinforcement.
Oh, just like arbitrary
reinforcement, because that actually has shown to increase responding just generally in the environment, right? So I'm just surprised.
I don't know that there might not be studies
looking at that
with this particular setup.
Yeah, you're right.
It had to be like this comparison between two.
Maybe that's what I'm going to do.
And it does feel like that is an experimental question, but on its face, if you went up to the average person and be like, I'm curious about learning, what would happen if I just randomly gave you stuff while learning, but not because you were learning, just because most people would be like, that sounds stupid and I don't want to study that.
I know.
Even though there is a reality to that is a good experimental question, but there's experimental question and there's that sounds really dumb. Nobody wants that.
Maybe that's my next thesis student's question.
Well, it may end up looking like these errors of omission and commission.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but it would be slightly different. So,
I'm so smart.
It's a great question. All right. So bunch of studies, bunch of predictors. So 34 studies in this review, and we're going to talk about ones that weren't in the review after we go over this. 114 participants. Again, most of them were 9 years old or younger. So will this have generality to older individuals? We'd assume so, but we don't know for sure. So some caveats there. They all had different ways of how they equated target difficulties. We talked about that being a big confound, and they sort of looked at efficiency. And they kind of found what I guess most of us we would have loved to hear, like, and these are the two manipulations that are always the best, so only do these. And of course, that's not what they found, because I never get what I want. And instead, there were a couple factors that did make a difference. There were a couple factors that didn't always make a difference, but when they did make a difference, it was a pretty decent sized difference. And then there were some factors that didn't seem to matter at all, or they mattered at chance level. So again, how hard is it to implement that? Does it matter? Do you have some sort of weird value proposition about why you want to use that? Hey, you be you, but it's probably not going to change your learner's ability to learn. So what was always resulted in the most efficient learning? Well, like we said, perfect treatment integrity 100% of the time was more efficient. So if you run the procedure correctly, that's going to result in better learner outcomes than if you do it kind of haphazardly. All right. Not a big surprise.
That's good advice.
Yeah. Edible items compared to other types of reinforcement, intangible plus edible compared to contingent praise, was 100% of the time more efficient at learning. They do note there were not a lot of studies looking at this. However, as they note, as Weinstock and colleagues note, if the number one thing you are concerned about with your learners' programming is efficiency of acquisition, as much as we do try to move away from edibles, we would prefer to use social reinforcers rather than edible or tangible reinforcers. It is a sad fact that edibles and tangibles will result in faster acquisition than social praise. It seems.
I have many thoughts on this that you can hear in a different episode.
But again, that is only if the only thing you care about is I need this to be as fast learning as possible.
It's always going to be one of those situations where it's like, well, we have to take into consideration multiple things here, which we cannot get into right now. But primary reinforcers are called primary for a reason.
Yeah. But
boom,
again,
girl! I'm gonna make a shirt.
That sounds like
sass.
But there might be other things you care about when it comes to acquisition.
There might be.
Efficiency is not always the number one concern. There were some parameters that they found that on average were more efficient, but they were not always more efficient. So that would be differential reinforcement for correct responses was more efficient than non-differential reinforcement for correct responses. Accumulated reinforcement was more often efficient than the distributed reinforcement. That's an interesting one because, I think we think about that sometimes with older learners maybe when they're like, let's do all these worksheets and then we'll go to the playground. But we don't always think about that for DTT where a lot of times we have every response results in the delivery of reinforcement. But potentially that's not always most efficient. At least in these analyses, it is not always most efficient.
But if you're someone like Rob who likes to collect things, right? I feel like you would want to collect all of it.
I want to collect all the reinforcers.
And then you can enjoy them at your own pace and in your own way.
Yes. I am someone who has an entire summer ahead of him, and until I complete every single possible thing I need to do in my life, I can't enjoy the summer. I have to get it all done.
I wish that would never happen for me. So in my life, you would perpetually be a mess.
Oh, I got to say, even with the system I have right now, I'm pretty much always kind of slightly miserable. Like, well, I'm having fun now, but I have so many more things in life that have to be done first. So it's not a good system.
Okay.
I need to maybe I need more distributed reinforcement in my efficiency of learning. They looked at some extra reinforcement. One study where they looked at extended social reinforcement plus as edibles compared to kind of crummy praise that was more efficient than other reinforcer types. And
good job.
Yeah. And then descriptive praise was often more efficient than general praise, which again, that goes with a lot of other research. All right. Yeah. So the next set of parameters were only more efficient sometimes. So either they had no impact whatsoever or they did have an impact. If there was a difference in efficiency,
wow, I love that.
This parameter seemed to be important, but a lot of times didn't seem to matter. So again, these would be ones that kind of like, hey, if they're easy for you to do, you might as well, because you don't know whether there's going to be a difference in efficiency until you are teaching. That would be differential outcome manipulations and immediate reinforcement being more efficient than non-differential outcomes and delayed reinforcement.
We all know that.
For most part, but only for most participants. Some people didn't seem to matter. It's like only slightly above like 50% for their evals. Having reinforcer choice was more efficient. Anytime there was a difference in efficiency, having reinforcer choice by the participant was the more efficient than experimenter choice. However, sometimes it didn't matter at all to the participants. So it really varied depending on who your participants are. So that's one of those idiosyncratic ones. Delivery of preferred tangible items versus delivery of other items was rarely more efficient. But again, if there was a difference in efficacy, tangible was more efficient than some other ones. And that was similar to like tokens also were more efficient when there was a difference. And even then, not all the time. Some things didn't matter as much would be things like high magnitude reinforcement, compound reinforcers. This one cut me to the quick. Enthusiastic praise versus neutral.
That's true.
Didn't really seem to be more efficient than neutral praise. So
we
all those people
we have tried to do this study.
Sound more fun.
So many times. I have tried to do this study, I think 5 or 6 times. And it has never come out the way I want it to.
So if I have ever told you, if I've ever supervised you and said you need to be more enthusiastic, you need to sound more enthusiastic, you can feel free to come and tell me to go straight to hell the next time you see me.
Oh my God.
Because
That's
I apparently,
Rob.
Well, they can if they want to. I would hope that they would just come over and say, don't you feel terrible that you were kind of wrong? And I'll say, I do feel terrible. But oh well. I mean, again, is it going to hurt anyone to use enthusiastic versus neutral praise? No, not really. It just doesn't lead to more efficiency.
Some learners may not like that.
Yeah.
So then it's going to come down to other factors. Yes. So again, we're only talking efficiency, and I think that makes it sort of like there's nothing here that we're saying, if you don't do this, you will get bad results. Just talking about the component of efficiency. All right. So we have a bunch of areas that seem to be potentially important when you're thinking about efficiency. Sometimes they don't have a lot of studies. We talked about some race to the top differences, but it does appear that things you should always be doing would be things like high procedural integrity And if you only care about efficiency, tangible edible is going to do better than just social praise. But again, you might care about other things than just efficiency. But that
and differentially reinforcing independent or correct responding.
Yes. All right. So there you go. Now, again, differential reinforcement correct unprompted responses, usually more efficient. Descriptive praise, usually more efficient. And the use of like extra reinforcement. These things are really easy to do. So you probably just want to kind of make that your go-to unless you have a reason for thinking otherwise, because it usually will result in more efficient responses. And then they recommend, there's a Campanaro et al. Article that we're not going to talk about, but they do go over some differential reinforcement assessment tools that you might be able to use to sort of look at which ones your learners like. And everything else may or may not matter. So certainly things like immediate reinforcement versus delayed, differential outcomes versus non-differential outcomes, tangible or tokens in your kind of reinforcer versus other topographies of reinforcement. They, again, aren't hard to do, some of those. So you may also want to make that part of your practice because it's either not going to matter at all or it will matter. And you won't know until you do it.
So if you were coming in and observing a session and your teacher was saying something's going wrong, they're not learning the skill, you would have to look at all those 5 areas that we just talked about, right? So the initial cue, the prompt, the appropriateness of the skill being taught, right, Jackie? The reinforcer, and then what was the last one? Oh, the intertrial interval. That one maybe, well, yeah, pace of instruction. Yeah.
Yep.
So you're going to need to be looking at all of those things. But if you're focusing in on the reinforcer component, you want to be seeing, is the reinforcer being delivered with fidelity, right? Are we using a high potency reinforcer of whatever topography that may be? And then I'm putting differential reinforcement in the top tier because they talked about it being pretty much in the top tier. And then are you reinforcing the correct responding and or unprompted responding with some type of higher quality or higher magnitude of reinforcement? So if I know we just like launched a barrage of things at you, but those are some of the key components to be looking for primarily if you're seeing not the skill acquisition that you were expecting to see.
Yeah.
Totes.
Yeah. We, again, don't know. We talked about some of the challenges with this type of race to the top research. We also don't know, is efficiency related to maintenance? A lot of fluency.
Yeah, we don't know.
Training would probably say likely, but we also don't know. So you could be like, we learned this skill really fast, and it's gone in a week, even though we used all of the.
It's like my whole life.
Yeah, right.
All right. So that's the initial systematic analysis. But people have been publishing on improving DTT and improving efficiency. After that article, they didn't just say, that's it, we did it, everybody.
We did it, everybody.
They kept researching. So we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some later manipulations and see how does that impact efficiency. We will be right back.
Hi, do you want to be a BCBA, also known as a board certified behavior analyst?
Sure, we all do.
Now you can come to Regis College in Weston, Massachusetts to get your graduate degree, just minutes outside of Boston.
Choose from any one of these courses.
Masters of Science in Applied Behavior Analysis.
Masters of Science in Special Education, dual degree in Special Ed and ABA.
Or be eligible for your postmaster certificate.
You can complete your degree and be ready to sit for the exam in 2 years.
And our 2022 graduates had a 92% pass rate on the BACB exam.
Come enjoy approved fieldwork placements, ethics mini handbooks, PhD levels professors, small class sizes, and a service trip to Iceland if interested.
And don't forget, our program is accredited by the Association of Behavior Analysis International, or ABAI, as a Tier 1 master's degree program.
Don't delay. Supplies are limited. Learn more at regiscollege.edu.
Again, that's www.regiscollege.edu.
regiscollege.edu.
One more time, www.regiscollege.edu.
See you there.
Bye.
And we are back talking about factors influencing skill acquisition. But before we continue, I want to remind all of our listeners that ABA Inside Track is ACE and QABA approved. And by listening, you're able to earn 1 learning credit. And if you are a patron at our $5 and up level, you will get a special bonus code that you can use to get that learning credit for no additional charge as a thank you for being a patron. But first thing you got to know is you need to finish listening to this episode. When you're done, you're going to click a link in your podcast player or go to our website, abainsidetrack.com, and find this episode. You're going to need to put in some key information, including 2 secret code words. And again, if you're a patron, you'll have a third on the video feed. So you'll have a link on the Patreon page that only you get access to. That'll have a third discount code. That's separate. I'm going to give you the first of those 2 main code words. Everyone needs these right now. And it is hopscotch. HOPSCOTCH. It's that game where you jump around and toss stones and you do jumping on one foot kind of stuff. Nobody knows the rules. It's an ancient game.
I know the rules.
Oh, do you know the rules?
Yeah.
Okay.
You just haven't played with the right people.
Apparently, Jackie's from a time, a valley beyond time where they still know the rules to hopscotch. I guess I could have looked them up on the internet as well. Hopscotch. All right, let's continue with our discussion. So,
no, just kidding.
No, we do have to.
I'm done.
We can't efficiently podcast if we don't talk. So we're going to continue on. So we did our wine stock systematic analysis, but as we said before the break, there's still more research to be done. So Jackie, why don't you take us through the Gurigian et al. Article looking at reinforcer choice as antecedent or consequence?
Yeah, so that's the one I'm going to talk about. It is not in the systematic review. I double checked about the dates that it could have been in the systematic review, and it could have. Mm-hmm. But I'm thinking it's not because this is not an area that they talked about.
Yeah.
Right? So this isn't one of the things they talked about, so we're not like poo-pooing the systematic review because this wasn't one of their...
It's a great review.
Yeah.
It's a great review.
Yeah.
So I just want to say that. And I found this article fascinating because I actually haven't considered this option before.
Yeah. Right?
When I'm like, oh yeah, I could do both of these things. And so
I have considered it.
Oh, good for you.
But not experimentally.
Right. Yeah. I've not considered it at all. And so what they're talking about is when should you provide the choice on what reinforcer you're going to get when you're doing skill acquisition. Mm-hmm. So I just never thought about that. And I think a lot of people don't think about it because wherever you work, there is probably a thing that you do that everyone at your job does.
Yeah.
Right? They might do it before. You might say, okay, what do you want to earn? I'm going to put it on your board so you can see it.
Right. Sometimes there's even like a spot on the token board where you put the thing.
So you can see it.
But what if they change their mind?
I know.
And some people have they have like weird rule governed behavior about, no, you made the choice and now I must hold you accountable to this choice of a thing that should be fun.
So they say both options, if you're doing it before or after, they have benefits, right? With the antecedent, then maybe it's going to influence motivational operations, right? Because you see what you're earning. Like, okay, once I finish this stuff, I'm going to be able to skateboard because I see it on my token board. But if it's consequence, if it's after your skill acquisition, then it's going to actually play what's currently what you want, right? So whatever your preference is at that moment, you might not want to skateboard now after you've done that work. So that's going to influence you there. And previous research looked at this using a progressive ratio schedule to see when and where responding would stop and what was more effective. And they found that 2 out of 4 participants maintained higher responses with the antecedent manipulation or the antecedent reinforcer choice. So what do you want to earn? Put it on your token board, then we'll do it, and then you'll get it, whereas it didn't matter for 2. So for this study, it's a quick study. If you want to read a quick study.
It was
so quick. I thought for some reason, I thought it was like 20 pages long. And then when I opened it to read it, I was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's like
only
7.
5. Yeah.
Oh, do you ever have that great feeling where you've got like a big stack of papers and you're like, this is a long study. And you realize you forgot to print it double-sided.
Oh, yeah, that's
like,
I don't know.
No one except you prints out.
Yeah,
I love to have tangible copies.
No, but I do love it when you're like, ooh, this one's long. And then it has like a 5-page table in the middle of it.
Table
or all the references.
All the references.
All the references.
Yeah.
It's a one-pager, but I got so many references.
So this study wants to extend previous research, but replicate previous research by looking at what is more efficient or effective with the antecedent choice of reinforcer or consequence choice of reinforcer, but not using a progressive ratio schedule, just using conditional discrimination skill acquisition. And so they have 3 participants, ages from 5 to 9, all were all diagnosed with autism. They had a history of conditional discrimination, and they all had scored low to moderately low on the Peabody Picture vocabulary test, which I love. PPVT. I used to love running that assessment, even though I wasn't supposed to or authorized to do it. I just loved it.
Just run it for fun.
I used to love it. I used to run it for myself. Like, do I know all these? So they did it at the participant school in an empty room. They had, things that are in a classroom. Pencils, timer. They had stimuli binders. Do you remember using stimuli binders?
Oh, yeah.
So a place that we all worked at used to do this type of conditional discrimination, basically. And I want to explain it for people. So the binder's pre-made, right? And one page has the stimuli, the stimuli that you're going to observe. Mm-hmm. And then you flip the page, and then it's the comparison stimuli with the one on top. And then you just keep flipping the page. And all of the stimuli are there. So I think you could probably find those somewhere. I was thinking about it in the shower, and it does leave little room for error.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But it's like very rote, right?
Yes.
And very hard to fix if something's gone wrong because everything's already like laminated into the folder, right?
Sheet protectors.
Oh, yeah.
The sheet protectors. And you take out the stimuli, put in new stimuli.
So they use an adaptive alternating.
And a label maker. You need a label maker.
You definitely need a label maker, yeah. So you're already on your way.
Label.
You're on your way. So they used an adapting alternating treatment design to look at correct prompted and unprompted responses, but on the graph, they only looked at unprompted responses. And they did a whole lot of other data collection that they didn't talk about in the results and discussion.
Well, because
it was only 5. Yeah, so they're like, we have to cut all this out. So they measured the time within the trial, like how long it took, and how long the reinforcer interval was, but they didn't report on that. And didn't even kind of give us like a what happened. So they just did that. They only graphed the unprompted responses. The IOA and PI were high. They first did a preference assessment of color, and the 2 highest colors they put on top of the binders, the stimuli binders, and had a corresponding token board with the same color. So that, right? So let's say antecedent.
What's your favorite color, Jackie?
Mine is green.
Okay.
And brown.
Oh, see, we have the same. So I'll do orange.
Okay.
Or mustard gold.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right. Those are my top 3, 4.
Well, I mean, we're
obviously
both autumns.
Yeah.
So.
So I would have chose green for my antecedent stimuli board and brown for my consequence stimuli binder and corresponding token board because, right, the reinforcer quantity is the same. And the colors were assigned. The tokens were the same color. You earned 3 tokens to receive the reinforcer. They did a pre-test to make sure that the participants didn't know the stimuli. They used a constant prompt delay with a gesture prompt, and they started with a 0-second delay. And in order to move through the prompts every 5 seconds, you had to get 89%. And then once you were getting 56% correct, then they moved to differential reinforcement, where a prompted response received only praise, and an unprompted was praise and a tangible and a token, right? So there we go. In baseline, they opened the binder, they provided the SD, and then they praised general behavior, but not specific behavior so that you could see where people
had been taught yet.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then for each the antecedent condition, they prompted to touch the antecedent condition binder. So for me, that would be green binder with the corresponding
so it means you
token.
Selected your thing beforehand.
Yep. So I touch the binder first.
Okay.
The binder comes over. Then they show me my reinforcer choice board. I choose whatever's on the reinforcer choice board. I put it on my token board that's the same color as my stimuli binder. Mm-hmm. And then I go forward and move it. And then once I earn 3 tokens, I receive whatever I chose.
Okay.
Right? And so that's what they did for the antecedent. For the consequence condition, they prompted to touch the consequence condition stimuli binder with
the brown one.
The brown one with corresponding token board. They ran through the responses, and then at the end, they said, pick whatever you want.
After
and then
they did
the 3 responses, right? And then they get to choose what they want. So that's all they did. And for one participant, both conditions were similarly effective. And they suggested that maybe that's because the token exchange was the same at FR3. Who knows?
3.
3, yeah. That's
I feel like 10 is kind of more common.
And that's what they said. Yeah, they said maybe it was too short, right? And so it didn't feel like you had to wait.
I agree.
Right? Yeah, so they didn't know.
Someone could replicate this.
Yes, they really could. And 2 participants did better with the consequence condition.
So opposite of what was found
That's
before.
what they said. And they said, who knows why? Maybe it was the FR3. Maybe it was the progressive ratio. More research is needed. So
It's going to be
there
a
you go.
theme.
But there's
a
one
theme
more
throughout this
factor
one.
that we hadn't talked about yet.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to jump in and talk about Leon and et al.'s article looking at the effects of initial versus frequent preference assessments on skill acquisition. So we were talking about, where do we deliver the reinforcers? Well, how do we know that the reinforcers that have been identified are still serving as high quality or high magnitude, or, well, I guess in this case, high quality reinforcers? And is there a way to take advantage of sort of those natural human fluctuations for reinforcers? So this is, again, kind of a replication and extension of previous research that has looked at kind of how reinforcers are determined and varied. So again, we all know that we should use preference assessments. However, Graf and Karsten in 2012 did like a survey about preference assessments, and a lot of people said, I don't have time to do preference assessments. 70.4% said, well, actually 70.4% said that they used the paired stimulus preference assessment. And a lot of people said, I don't have time. And one of the comments they made is, that preference assessment does take a long time. What if you used a quicker preference assessment, like maybe the multiple stimulus without replacement preference assessment, which apparently only 20.4% of respondents are using. Now, I don't know if that's a 2012 problem, but like, I'm always shocked when people are like, I love the paired stimulant. And I'm like, what are you, like my grandma, dude? Like, get with the times. Brief MSWO is where
some
it's
participants
at.
can't scan.
I understand that there are some participants that can't scan.
But if they can, the MSWO is superior.
Let's say in these situations, people tell me that like this is the only preference assessment I have ever heard about, and it's the best one that ever exists, as opposed to there are times it is and is not the best preference assessment to use. So in any case,
little side rant.
I like to have a side rant. It's fun. So we've got previous research looking at this same phenomenon of, all right, well, when you've done your paired stimuli preference assessment, or you've done a daily multiple stimulus without replacement preference assessment right before you start your DTT or your work session, is there a difference? Because again, as we know, if you do a paired stimuli and then 3 months later, maybe you do another one, who knows how many times you've decided, I'd rather have something else in the meantime as a learner. And
oh, yeah.
So
it's kind of shocking.
It makes sense.
That it's like, every 6 months we'll find out your preferences.
Yeah.
And then we'll assume that they're static for
stable
6 months.
Forever and ever.
Nothing is static in my life for that long.
No.
And again, in previous research by De Leon, by Carr Nicholson and Higby, pretty much they looked at sort of these like concurrent chains arrangements, and they found that yes, when you do more frequent preference assessments, the items that come out of those frequent MSWOs do tend to result in, better responding or maximal responding. But, and this is why I think this is a really fun study, that's not the same as saying they actually do improve efficiency of acquisition in a work task, because those concurrent chains experiments are awesome, but a lot of times you're flipping a micro switch or something, not something that you're actually trying to teach individuals to necessarily do.
Yeah, relatively low effort response. Yeah, and there's not an acquisition component.
Sometimes the previous research, they looked at mastered tasks. But again, if someone is like, oh, can you do something that you've done a billion times? I actually don't care what reinforcer is being delivered to me because I can do the task so easily. So is there a factor there of the task is just such a low response effort that there's really not going to be a difference in reinforcement quality for the individual? Because whatever, it's all the same. This is so easy to do. So the purpose here was, what if we take a look at those same studies? If we look at an actual skill being acquired, and we look at the difference between that sort of, hey, we did our initial paired stimuli and that's the item we'll use, versus, hey, before every session, we do some brief MSWOs and then we use that item. Do we see differences? Do we see fluctuations? And does one outcome result in faster learning than the other? So we have 3 students diagnosed with autism, 4, 7, and 5 years of age. They all had different tasks. They all had different learning criteria. I'm not going to go into those details there, but basically it came down to learning about what questions, receptive discrimination of motor tasks, and receptive identification of shapes. And really here the goal was, all right, in which of these manipulations of stimuli being presented as a reinforcer do we see the fastest responding, the fastest independent responding? So they started with a paired stimulus preference assessment. One participant did like tangibles plus edibles. They do some combinations ones, and then they had to find kind of the top. They added an attention card, which was not one of the top preference items for that participant. And so everyone had their paired stimulus. So here's their top reinforcer, or here's our top preferred stimuli, which we know from experience is probably going to result in the highest amount of reinforcement value for this individual. And so they'd have conditions where they'd be teaching one set of stimuli, one set of skills, and for every correct response, they would get the item that was identified in the paired stimulus assessment. And that was the initial assessment condition, was what they called that. They did kind of the modified or adapted alternating treatment. They also had a frequent assessment condition. And in this condition, this was a different set of learning targets. You would do a brief MSWO, 3 repetitions of an MSWO using items that were in the paired stimulus preference assessment. But they do this before starting, and whatever item came out number 1 through the MSWO, that would be the item that was delivered contingently for correct responses. So again, that could be the same item, which sometimes it was. It could be a different item, which sometimes it was. But you would have that MSWO. And by brief, they did 3 MSWOs, which to me does not sound brief. When I think of brief MSWO, I think of like first 3 trials of an MSWO, and then I move on. This was 3 repetitions. They did find some of their participants kind of also agreed with me and weren't happy with how many MSWOs are being done. So they did actually have some modifications, like they do the first 3 trials 3 times because they were seeing some problem behavior, or the individuals stopped picking everything. They got top 3, and then they're like, I don't want to do this MSWO anymore.
Yeah. Top 3 is going to give you what you need.
Yes.
There is another study that I can't recall right now.
I think we talked about it on a previous episode. Maybe we didn't though. But yes, I had the same background. It might have been Rick Radford who told me this at some point. In any case, you had different teaching procedures, different targets, but the key component was some targets got taught in which reinforcement was delivered from only the paired stimuli, and other targets were taught in which you would kind of gain access to whatever the MSWO right before the trials came out as kind of your top preference. You have your baseline where you just, hey, let's learn. Again, nobody learned anything. That you had your treatment comparisons. So that was the adapted alternating responses, where you get 30-second access to your stimuli on an FR1 schedule, regardless of which condition you were in. And then we talked about the difference between the conditions. So what happened? Well, 2 participants acquired the targets faster when they were in that frequent assessment condition. So again, MSWOs right before the trials began, and then whatever item came out number 1 in MSWO, that was the one that was contingently delivered. One individual even plateaued when they were using that paired stimuli item over and over and over again, and they had to switch to the frequent. They never quite made it to mastery. However, they did start, they did show an increase to about 80% correct responding with that switch. One participant really didn't show any difference. However, it was kind of odd in that a lot of times this individual's, Matt was the participant here, would choose a stimulus. Choose a stimulus different from the paired stimuli assessment during their MSWO. And that was, as they refer to, they wondered if this was maybe the save the best for last phenomenon. That is literally what they call it. And I was like, give me more definition of what that is. Like, nope, that's what it is. The idea that the individual picks the thing they want the most last in the preference assessment. A lot of people would do that. I thought they'd have a fancier term, but no, that's what it is in quotes in the article. And what they're wondering is as the participant did more MSWOs, you started seeing them choosing what they believe actually was their highest preferred item more quickly within the chain of events. So they're wondering if they didn't see a difference for that participant between the initial and the frequent because they were learning the contingency of no, actually pick the thing you want to have and it will be delivered contingently on correct responses. And if they'd understood that contingency, again, that's hypothetical. They don't know if this is the case. Would the frequent MSWOs actually also have been? Would have been 3 out of 3 more efficient.
And I'm blanking right now, and you probably said it, and I missed it, but now I'm coming back to it because I have more questions. Was it a 5 or a 7 MSW? I know it wasn't a little one because that's one of the limitations.
I do not remember. Okay, I believe it was 7, but I don't remember.
I think it was 7 too, but I'm also wondering what future research could look at is like a paired stimulus preference assessment with like the top 2. Like, which one do you want?
Oh, that was like 8 or that was the
right. No, I know. But if you did a shorter MSWO, which they say for future research, and a shorter preference assessment before, would you get different results? I don't know.
I mean, the key thing they also noted was when you compare, all right, well, how many times did the MSWO result in the participant choosing a different item than they'd chosen in the paired stimulus. And for each participant, it was like about half. So it was like 8 out of 15 for one, 5 out of 9 for another, 5 out of 7 for another. So it was either half or more than half.
Right.
So pretty much, even though they had some stable preferences, 2 of them had pretty stable preferences for high-ranking items. And again, one we talked about sort of kept flip-flopped sort of what was their lowest. It seemed like their lowest might actually have been their highest because it shifted over time. Really, that makes sense in terms of why the frequent assessment would result in faster acquisition, because there was definitely a fluctuation as to what the individual wanted. So one would say, hey, were they actually being delivered the most preferred item per session? And the answer would be no, probably not.
Yeah.
So it does seem like, hey, you know what? Let's look at future research. Like you said, Jackie, can we do shorter MSWOs to get similar results? Like a 1-session MSWO, would that be good enough? We also certainly don't know anything about things like maintenance, some of the other questions we looked at. Should we be doing this assessment before like every session, or would it be like we do one every morning and then that's that highest item throughout the rest of the day? You know, like how
boring. That would still be boring.
Yeah, what's the time kind of capacity for where are these fluctuations? And we also have to be thinking, even if it were, well, you should run an MSWO before every single session. That also starts becoming a big kind of time suck too.
It does.
So
they might be bored of choosing.
They might get bored of choosing. So like this,
just give me what I want.
Where's the time frame we're looking at to sort of capture this increase in efficiency? So still some research there, but it does appear that if you are only doing one preference assessment and then that top item is the same item that's going to be presented for the next 3 months or whatever, you are probably not helping your learner learn in the most efficient way possible. All right. And then we got one more. Diana, let's look at another. If you thought systematic reviews, if you're tired of those, well, too bad. We got another one.
All right, I'm going to review this quickly. There were not really any new articles on differential reinforcement that weren't covered in the Weinstock. So, but I really like this topic, and I think it's really important when we're thinking about skill acquisition. So more recently, there was a new systematic review of the differential reinforcement articles. So that is what I have to review for us for today. So the previous differential reinforcement review was in 2010, Kodak and Vlad Askew. And at that point in time, there were only 4 articles that they could review in this format related to differential reinforcement effects. So an update was due. At this point in 2024, they had 10 articles to talk about. So the Cividini-Mota article.
An 100% improvement.
That's right. Yes. Amazing work, everyone.
We did it.
So they took those 10 articles that they now had and took a look at all the varying factors related to differential reinforcement that were present in those articles. The participant demographics were pretty much the same as what we've reviewed already. Mostly it was learners under 12 with some type of developmental disability, autism, Down syndrome, etc. They targeted a wide range of skill acquisition programs, but all were ones that they could do sort of that comparison that we've been discussing. So things like discrimination tasks, tacting, sequencing, imitation. And they also looked at the reinforcer class. Most of these articles used edibles as the reinforcer, paired with praise. One used tokens and praise, and one used toys and praise. And there were several different ways in which the differential reinforcement conditions were compared. So many of them used a no differential reinforcement and a differential reinforcement 1, a DR1 comparison, but there are also some that included a DR3, a DR2, a DR4, a DR1 for qualitative or quality comparisons, DR1 for magnitude comparisons. And then they also briefly looked at the onset of the differential reinforcement. Like, did they start using it right away? Did they wait until there was no response, etc.? Whew. So all of these things were compared. And I'm going to scroll down here to get to the part where I talk about the results.
Scroll.
What they broke down for us is, and what you probably are interested in, is where were the most favorable results, right? So what actually produced the most efficient responding? And although these studies all did sort of varying different comparisons, the by and large takeaway was that using a differential reinforcement 1 was the most efficient approach. So of like the 32 participants or 31 that were in this portion of the study and all of these comparisons, for 20 of them, the DR1 won out versus whatever else it was compared to. Only in 4 of those cases did no differential reinforcement work out to be the best. So for most people, this mattered. It mattered that they received either a larger reinforcer, a better quality reinforcer, a longer access to the reinforcer, etc., for differentially, quote unquote, better responding. So independent responding, or in one case, just specifically unprompted responding, which I will discuss in a second. So by and large, differential reinforcement is the way to go. We should be using that. And
reinforcer for the independent, chromier reinforcer, or no reinforcer for the prompted response.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Or independent. Sometimes it's just correct or not correct.
Sorry, the independent, yes.
Yeah. It depends on the study. But if you really want to make it effective, discriminating between the independent responses and, like you said, the prompted responses will get you the most bang for your buck here. They also examined, like I said, immediate and early onset of differential reinforcement versus waiting until there was like some indication that you should start differentially reinforcing. And although Carson and Carr in 2009 had thought that you might need to delay the onset, and Jackie, your article also kind of like noted that, right? The Greggian. More recently, now that they've kind of added on additional studies, they said that does not seem to be necessary. You don't need to wait until there is an issue or to establish some type of contingency. You can immediately or very early on start differentially reinforcing responding, and it works. It's had favorable results. So that is another piece to put into your pocket. Now, I also just want to note that only Cividini-Mota 2013 looked at differential reinforcement in the context of prompt dependency, and that is another big issue. Like, many people who are listening to this probably want to know what to do in the context of prompt dependent responding specifically, because that can be a really big barrier to skill acquisition. So we have one aspect or one piece of evidence, I guess, that says differential reinforcement can work in that capacity. But there's just not a lot of research out there on it. If folks are interested in that specifically, there was another study they talked about here that wasn't included in this one, Grogan and Kodak from 2019. They also looked at prompt dependency and had some suggestions, but they didn't include it here because it wasn't one of these like race to the top kind of comparison studies. But they looked at differential reinforcement compared to other prompt methods. So there were other things you could do in addition to differential reinforcement. So that one's worth checking out as well if folks who are listening have that particular issue that they need to address. So another great systematic review, differential reinforcement is, to me, a really important component of skill acquisition. So it's one that should be included, and you can check out all the ins and outs of how these studies were or looked at this in that review.
All right.
Well,
let's move into dissemination station and sum it all up. All right.
I started early.
That's okay. So a couple caveats. Certainly, we know that this isn't an exhaustive amount of research. We have issues with race to the top. Is efficiency always the most important factor for your client to take into account? We also certainly don't know every single grouping. Some of the studies we're basing this on, there's only a limited number of participants. However, given all of these caveats, let's sum up what are probably good practices if efficiency is your number one goal that you sort of want to have as your baseline of components in your discrete trial training programming.
Or any program. Right. Do your assessments. Right? If you can ask your students what they like, ask them, right? You can ask them, do you like me offering the opportunity before, or do you like the opportunity to offer my reinforcer after? If they want to change their reinforcer after, let them.
Yeah, please let them.
Doesn't make sense to be like, this is what you chose. You need to learn about choosing.
Right.
You know, we all change our mind. Right? I will actually make a whole breakfast and decide I don't want to eat it and put it in the fridge and make another breakfast. So, right? Like, I have that right. So do they.
Yeah. Right.
I think doing your assessments and making sure that you're using things that are reinforcing will really help you go a long way.
So look at those brief MSWOs.
Yep.
At least at the beginning of the day or before the session.
And maybe you don't even have to do a brief MSWO. Maybe you can just do like have 4 items and be like, out of these 2, which one do you want? Yeah. You can do like a brief paired preference assessment, right? Or a single stimulus. Like, do you want this?
Yep.
Do they say yes or no? Like, just asking and not assuming that they want what they want. That's
Your one assessment a quarter is not cutting it. If you want to be fancy, do one formal one, fine.
Fancy.
But you need to do something more frequently.
Yeah, I agree. That's my main take home.
Yeah. I think this whole area of looking at, instructional design is really interesting and important in our field, and perhaps we don't spend enough time on it. So I'm always really interested in this as a topic. To me, all of these points really focus back on that phrase, like the learner is always right. So if you are being called in to observe a session or consult and someone is telling you this kid's just not getting it, right? They're not learning this skill. Well, they're doing what they can do underneath the set of conditions that have been presented to them. And it's on us to figure out what is going wrong here, because something's not right? If you don't have the right set of conditions arranged for learning to occur, that's on us to figure out what needs to be changed.
Totes.
And so it definitely could be one of these reinforcement parameters. It could be any one of those other 4 parameters I listed earlier as well. And there is so much to sort through and unpack with respect to any particular learning opportunity. And we have that background to observe, consider all of these varying behavioral principles at play, the salience of the stimuli that are present, the MOs that are present, and sort out how we can create a learning opportunity where this person is going to feel successful. And that's a really important part of our job. So I really like getting into the weeds of all of this stuff here, because each one of these could be the difference between someone feeling defeated and feeling successful.
Mm. And differential reinforcement for
way to go.
Independent versus. Yeah. All right. That sounds like a pretty set one.
I apparently didn't say what Rob thought.
Did not
I was
answer the question, which is...
Yeah, I did.
Well, you kind of went off on a very important, but not necessarily answering my question.
Valuable tangent.
And then we had a couple other factors, things like that.
I didn't read your thoughts once again.
Well, my verbal behavior was, here's what I want to hear. So you don't need to read my thoughts in that case. But certainly looking at, again, the reinforcer choice, the preferred, if efficiency matters, you could use tangibles. However, you do need to be careful about why you're using tangibles versus just social praise. But that can be something you might need to change. And then things like high magnitude reinforcement, compound reinforcers, enthusiastic praise versus neutral.
You don't need to.
They're not doing anything as much. But that differential reinforcement does seem to be key for efficiency. And then the choice, when choice is delivered and how often is choice assessed, seem to be big ones. All right, let's wrap it up. Pairings.
Okay. Da-da-da-da. It's time for pairings. Pairings is the part of the show where I tell you about past episodes you might want to check out if you found this one interesting. So we have discussed some of these varying components of skill acquisition, and in numerous past episodes, I present them now to you to check out. They include episode 11, where we talked about preventing errors in discrete trial training.
How young we were.
I know, right? Episode 30, where we talked about prompting. Whoa. Episode 61, we talked about discontinuous data collection with Dr. Mary Kate Carey.
Love her.
Episode 118, masked trials versus the world. That was Rob named that one.
We should do a follow-up to that episode, because I feel like there's been some really good research since then on let's add it to the list.
I'll add it to the list.
Add it to the list.
Sure thing. Episode 131, where we did talk about prompt dependence with Dr. Katya Sivadini-Mota.
Also love her.
Yep. Episode 238, where I ranted about moving away from edible reinforcement. Episode 240.
We did in that one.
I felt like I was living through episode 238 today as well.
Episode 240, we talked about synchronous reinforcement with Dr. Claudia Dozier.
Oh, yeah.
And then finally, relatively recently, episode 266, not that recently, we talked about error correction. Yeah.
Yeah.
And not really any since then that I could remember.
Okay.
But there's a lot to pick from, so people can go back and
what did you
check
just say?
That out. Masked trials.
Yeah.
And then I also like to recommend a snack to go with our episode.
I added.
I see that. Our snack for today is microwave popcorn and lemonade. And the reason why it's microwave popcorn is because I feel like there's a lot of differential reinforcement involved in making microwave popcorn.
Yes.
Because if you open that door too soon, you're going to get a lot of extra kernels. And if you open that door too late, you are going to get burned popcorn. And if you rely on the ding, that is a false SD for opening the door very often, because it will often be on one side or the other of that. So it's really an art
And it's also an art to make lemonade,
There you go.
right? If you put too much sugar in and not enough lemon, then nobody wants to drink it. If you put too much lemon in and not enough sugar, everyone's going to go make the face like, right?
Yes.
So I knew where you were going.
All right.
Nice. Right. And it's a good summertime
And
snack.
also kind of gross to put them together maybe, but that's fine.
Popcorn and lemonade. Yeah, I mean, you could.
Maybe. I mean, that's what you might have at a movie.
fair.
A movie or a fair.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway, write in if you eat popcorn and lemonade together.
All right.
I'm waiting.
Make sure you like and subscribe and smash that some kind of button.
Smash the button
Let us know in the comments.
down below.
Where are these comments? Who knows?
I love when people say down below. Down below.
I hate all that.
There's
crap.
no videos. Except this is a video.
This is a video. Not for everybody. So now everyone got to see point
Even as the
at
camera.
nothing.
Oh,
It's right there.
I thought it was this.
oh my
For
God.
2 seconds, I'm like, I'm not in this at all.
Jack-
No,
Without
you've been
the-
in it the whole time.
You've
It's
been-
only
you've
pointed
been in
right in your
frame.
face.
I
Oh,
did
that's
this a long
fine.
time ago.
That's awesome. That's why I haven't looked at the camera because I didn't know where it
It's a
was.
hidden camera. If you looked at the camera, you also would not be looking at your mic. So your
That's
sound
true.
would be like,
Okay, well, I didn't look at the
there we
camera.
go. Okay.
Hey.
All right. Well, thanks so much. That brings us to the
you're
end
welcome.
of the episode. Thank you all so much for our listeners for voting on this topic. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon, patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. Don't forget, go to the video link. I'll have this link, but not everyone can access it, so that you can get your bonus discount code to get a CE for this episode for no additional charge. But everyone, don't forget, you need your second secret code word. It's right now. It's jump rope. JUMP space ROPE. If you put them together, it's not going to matter.
Did you know I bought that today?
You
No,
bought a jump
I
rope?
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Jump rope's
Well,
fun.
good for you.
Yeah.
It's good. It's heart healthy.
I know. And it's bone healthy. That's why I bought it.
Oh,
Nice.
Because of the smashing on the ground.
that's good for your bones to smash on the ground repeatedly?
Yeah, it makes them stronger.
Okay, great. I like a good jump rope. Jump rope is your code word. Jump rope. All right. Well, where were we? Oh, we were thanking our patrons. Thank you so much for listening. But we also want to thank everybody for listening. We would appreciate it. You don't have to smash any buttons. Just subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you like to get your podcasts.
Come and smash into the house.
You can also smash on your computer to go to abainsidetrack.com to find links to all of the articles we discussed here. You can smash on those hyperlinks to find those articles and to get CEs for previous episodes. You can smash the address button and then smash your keyboard to type in patreon.com/ABAinsidetrack to join us on Patreon, where subscribers can get access to all these episodes a week ahead of time. At the $5 level, like we said, you can get access to these listener choice episodes in video format as well as with a free CE. If you subscribe at the $10 and up level, though, you're able to get our book club episodes, which come out once a quarter, and you're able to get 2 CEs for free, no additional charge for being at that level. We just did The Body Keeps the Score was our last one. We'll be doing our Oops Supervision book club. There we go. Every episode must have that now. Our Oops book club in September for Supervision September coming up. But you really want to be on the Patreon if you want those episodes as soon as possible. Patreon.com/ABA Inside Track. A couple final thanks. Thanks to Dr. Jim Carr for recording our intro outro music, Kyle Sturry for our interstitial music, and Dan Thabit of the Podcast Doctors for his amazing editing work. We'll be back next week with another fun-filled episode. But until then, keep responding. Bye.
Bye.